So the next question we have here is about a 4-month-old, and really just asking, what is a good routine for a 4-month-old for bedtime and timings around the day? This mother says that they've tried many things like dark rooms, no TV, or sounds after 7 o'clock, but it doesn't seem to make a difference, and bedtime can be a bit of a battle. And they are looking for this baby to settle in their own room when they get to 6 months, because baby's actually getting too big for its sleep space. Mum is concerned baby will never sleep in their cot as well. So at 4 months age, would I be looking for a routine for a 4-month-old? No, I really, really wouldn't. I'd be looking for baby to be roughly having about 4 naps a day. And again, for these to be timed quite well around the baby's, what the baby is showing you. Often I don't see really more of a clear routine happen for babies until they're about 6 months old and they're onto solids and the circadian rhythm is there and things like that. Up until then, it's kind of a little bit all over the place. At 4 months old, your baby's still really tiny. So if you were to start getting a really kind of strict routine in place, your baby's sleep needs are going to change rapidly, and from 1 week and definitely from 1 month to the next, it's going to be really, really changeable. So kind of getting a routine in place at this age can be a bit of a waste of time and a waste of energy. Again, I'd be looking to your baby. I'd be adding in those additional clues, like I've said, so you've got other things to kind of work with as your baby gets bigger. In terms of dark rooms, I wouldn't be, again, as discussed earlier with the 5-month-old baby, I wouldn't be looking at dark rooms during the day. I'd be getting baby to nap wherever it works. And in terms of settling into the cot that you're concerned about, that's a tricky one. Again, you could use the additional cues to get your baby to settle into the cot, and we have what's called gentle behavior modifications, some really gentle sleep strategies to work with that. At 4 months, they are very, very young, so I wouldn't be getting too worked up about that. And you said about in the daytime, you're trying to get baby to go into the cot to get used to it, but they get cross, they cry, they roll over, legs get stuck in bars. Again, I'm really not a massive fan of babies napping in cots during the day. I don't think it makes a huge difference to overnight sleep, because by the time your baby's 6 months old as well, and that circadian rhythm's more set in, and your baby's now getting to an age where they're going to be starting to make melatonin, which is the sleepy hormone, you're going to find that that's going to aid bedtime anyway in a different way that works with daytime sleep. Okay. I would be adding in additional sleep cues when your baby is sleeping now, and when they're, every time they're going down for a sleep, really, so that you can then have them transferable to the cot. So it's less about the cot, but more about how the baby falls asleep and what that routine is. So I don't look at, like I said, routines during the day. You want kind of 4 well-spaced naps, so baby is not getting overtired during the day. And then as for bedtime, I think bedtime is going to depend on when the last nap was. So some 4-month-olds are like, do you know what, 8 o'clock, I'm done for the day, I'm ready for bed. And you're going to know if that's your baby or not. Other 4-month-olds are going to be sitting up till 9, 10, 11 o'clock with their parents and going to bed with them. That's also very, very normal. You will know which one your baby is and which one they need to be. But what I'd be looking at doing around bedtime is having the same few steps to sleep. Okay, so rather than saying 7 o'clock, this baby, we've got to get them to bed regardless of what's happened that day, it's more a case of kind of spotting your child's tired signs and thinking, okay, it now seems like a good idea for bed. I think that's what they're needing, whether that's 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And then just having a few of the same steps. Something, again, transitional can be really helpful with this. So it might be that you have the same music goes on, the same blanket, the same space that you're getting them into sleep. You feed them and then you do whatever it is that you do to get them to fall asleep. But you have these, just a few steps. At 4 months old, you definitely don't want a great big long drawn out routine, because your baby's going to be exhausted before they've even finished the bedtime routine. But like I said, just a few steps, 10 minutes, nothing crazy, just, so you just prep them really that they're going to bed. Winding down for sleep in the evening, then I'd probably be saying ideally no screens. Again, that's very individual. Some people, that's the last thing that they want to knock off, and that's absolutely fine. You have to do what works for you. But I'd definitely be saying, dull the lights, draw the curtains so that that kind of melatonin can start to kick in as well. In terms of getting your baby to settle into a different sleep space, I'm going to discuss that a little bit more with you guys now. So we've talked a lot about adding in additional cues, and someone has talked about habit stacking. So with all of these babies, I would say they're all very, very young. I wouldn't be looking at any kind of more firm sleep strategies or anything like that until they're much, much older, and if you ever needed them. And I would say that I never work with cry out or anything like that, but I only ever work with strategies that may involve some crying with much, much older children. For example, a toddler that's waking every hour and a half, and we need to work on that. And we never leave babies to cry by themselves. It's more of a case of supporting a child to make a change. And at that age, you see some resistance because the child's like, this isn't what I'm used to and I don't like it. But we do that in a supportive way. With these babies, all kind of, 6 months and under, I wouldn't be looking to do any drastic changes like that. These babies are still going to need night feeds, but it's about what we can do to proactively help them to have as much settled sleep as possible. So number one is setting the circadian rhythm, okay, a bit of what we call sleep shaping. So it's going to be about having it light in the daytime and dark overnight, okay? We don't want to be having a party at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. We want to keep it nice and dim and quiet. I'm not a fan of saying don't make eye contact with your baby. Absolutely not. Your babies need you to respond to them, but rather than maybe during the day, you're going to be more animated and excitable and playing. During the night, it's going to be dull tones, quiet tones, whispered, quiet voices and quiet room, dark room, as well. One of the great things that I find works really, really well overnight is to just have maybe one of those little tiny, there's a little touch lamp you can get for a baby where you press the top and it goes very, very dim light on the side, so you can see to latch your baby or change nappies or whatever it is you're doing, but you can keep it really dim. So that's kind of like sleep shaping during the day. The second one I'd be looking at is look to your baby and their tired signs, okay? Now, the difficulty with this is we don't want to get really, really obsessed with overtiredness, but it is something we do need to understand. So I would suggest starting to look to your baby, and how do you know your baby is showing you're tired? How do you know they're showing you that they don't really like what they're doing right now? Maybe they're a bit bored. Maybe they just don't like the environment they're in. Maybe they don't like the toy that they're being played with, or maybe they don't like the person that they're talking to. Okay. And we can monitor babies and watch them quite closely for that. One of the things that can happen with overtiredness is that people start to misinterpret every cue that the baby's doing for tiredness. Now, yes, with these young babies, you're going to have tiredness happen quite a lot because their sleep needs are high, so they need regular naps. But we also don't want these babies to get bored and spend all their day just trying to get down for naps. So I've worked quite a lot with parents at kind of 4 or 5 months old, and they just seem to spend all their day trying to get this baby down for a nap. And I say to the parents, how does that feel for you as a parent? Does it feel fun, or does it feel a bit dull and a bit boring? And more often than not, they say, well, it's pretty dull. We're just spending all day trying to get our baby back to sleep again. So you've got to think, what's it like for the baby? That's a dull existence, isn't it? Just spending all day to get back to sleep. And then that creates more issues. So I'd be saying with these babies, get them outside, concentrate on what happens in between the nap times. Okay, how can you get your baby outside? How can you fill up their sensory cup? What can you be doing with them? And I know it's hard with some little tiny, tiny dots, but maybe just sitting outside in the grass for a bit. Outside is the best place, if I'm honest, because indoors, if you look around your rooms indoors, everything's static, isn't it? If you go outside, everything's always moving. So they are immediately getting a sensory kind of stimulation out there as well. So we often see babies sleeping particularly well, where they've had lots of outdoor time. And also that broad spectrum daylight they get outside is really going to help set that circadian rhythm. So the other thing you're going to find as well is if you're looking to your baby and you're thinking, I think maybe you're tired, but I'm not quite sure, getting them outside, you're going to quickly know, really, because if they go outside and they're happy doing what they're doing, then, they're going to carry on fine. And you can just think, actually, they just needed a change of environment. They needed some extra kind of stimulation or whatever. If they're still a bit kind of whingy and fed up, whatever, you think, yeah, actually, you're definitely ready for a nap. And by watching our babies in this way, we can really start to get to know them. You don't want to be in a position where every time your baby's sleep needs changes, you feel like you need a whole new routine and you need to get a sleep consultant or read a book and find out what they need next. My focus is on making you really confident and feel that you are, and you absolutely are, the expert in your child. However, I remember someone telling me that with my first baby and thinking, good Lord, if I'm supposed to like know everything about this baby, then he hasn't got hope in hell, because I don't know what I'm doing. But by focusing in, watching them, what cues do they give you? And they will all be different. Okay, so some of your babies, like I said, will just kind of glaze over when they've had enough and they're getting a bit tired. Some will rub their eyes, some will get whingy, some will get more excitable. Okay, so some babies, really happy babies, tend to be actually the hardest, trickiest ones when it comes to sleep, bizarrely. But because often what happens is they're not giving really clear signs that they're tired. They just kind of get more excitable, more worked up, get a bit screechy. Maybe this is sounding familiar to some of you. And what we're actually starting to see there is that, cortisol and adrenaline kicking in, and the babies are getting more excitable, and it leads into overtiredness. So again, try and spot your little ones. When are you seeing this happen? It will happen at different times throughout the day. What can you do to get your baby off to sleep? Number one, don't worry about what it is that you're doing. Just get the sleep happening. Just manage this tiredness. Just manage this sleep pressure throughout the day, into bedtime. And then, like I said, a very short bedtime routine. Doesn't have to, especially with these young babies, I wouldn't necessarily be saying bath them before every bedtime routine, because that just exhausts them. Make that a daytime activity as well. Make it fun for them. And yeah, like I said, just a few short, simple steps into bed, which you can then continue throughout as they get older as well, which is really helpful. And then alongside that, when you're doing these sleeps, wherever they're happening, pushchair, sling, car, whatever you're doing, okay, just to get these sleeps happening, add in the additional cues. So if you're breastfeeding a baby off to sleep, totally normal, totally natural, okay? Nothing wrong with it unless it becomes an issue for you. I don't want you guys, though, spending months doing this, worrying you're doing something wrong. It's such a normal way to feed your baby, to settle your baby to sleep, because ultimately we just want to calm the babies, and then naturally their sleep pressure will kick in and they'll fall asleep. But alongside that, adding in a sound, shushing is great because everyone can do it. You start singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, it can be a bit of a pain at 3 o'clock in the morning having to do that. So shushing is ideal. Patting baby's bottom, or like I said, stroking their face, whatever works well for your child. Adding in a transitional object. I'm a big fan of something like a muslin because they're easily replaceable. Typically we get these lovely, beautiful big ones now, don't we? And I think they work really well for that because they kind of double up as a blanket as well for when you're out and about. You might want to, as they get a bit older, introduce like a sleepy phrase. So it could literally be something like sleepy time now, or something like that, that you say when they're falling asleep. And you can even introduce a scent, so something that you like to wear that you can then even have made into like a mix with a carrier oil and rub on your baby's feet before they go to bed. And you can introduce that at nap times as well, so they have another sensory cue that sleep is happening. Now, you don't need to do those things instead of feeding off to sleep or instead of rocking off to sleep, whatever you're doing, but introduce them as well as. So what we then start to do is we build on that baby's neural pathway to fall asleep, because otherwise what can happen is that they have one way of falling asleep and one way only. And your babies are a blank canvas. They just work, their little brains are developing all the time. And if they only ever have one way to fall asleep, that neural pathway gets really, really set in stone. That's what I do, and that's how I fall asleep. And then when we try and make changes, it can be really hard. So what we do is we work with the one that's working, and then we add in the other one. So for example, let's say you're feeding off to sleep or rocking. They tend to be the ones that people want to eventually maybe lose, or, or they're finding it tricky that they're always having to do those things. You would continue with rocking or feeding your baby off to sleep, and then you would add in a sound, an object, a touch, so the patting or whatever, a scent, and you've then moved on from like 1 to 5 different neural pathways to fall asleep. And then when you're looking to settle your little one down, for example, transitioning into the cot or into the sidecar, or you just want to be able to have someone else to settle them off to sleep, you're in a much better place to kind of rely less on the one that you don't want to have to rely on all the time. And actually what I would tell you is I find so many parents who start to monitor their babies more, work out when it is they need to go to sleep during the day, manage that sleep pressure during the day better, add in additional sleep cues, and they don't have to change up anything else. And when the breastfeeding parent is still with baby, they still feed off to sleep, but the baby isn't solely reliant on that. Other people can do it as well, or mum can use those other sleep cues to potentially roll away from baby once they've fallen asleep. So they're just some kind of tips there as well, like I said, alongside setting that circadian rhythm as well. All these babies are really, really young. Nothing within what anyone has written here I've gone, oh my gosh, what's happening there? That's something really awful. They all sound very, very normal, but the only things that concern me are where we've had 2 cases where someone's talking about kind of wind, babies in a lot of pain and things like that. And when it comes to things like that, I would definitely say you want a feeding assessment to make sure there isn't any excess air going in as the baby's feeding. And obviously, if it's more concerning things like constipation, the baby's really, really upset and you're really worried, always go to your GP or health visitor and get that sort of clinically assessed as well. So you've got the medical professionals involved also. I hope that's given you guys a few tips around your own personal situations, but also some kind of longer term things that you can work with and think about.